So thank you for being here. My name is Manuel Chavez. I'm the Education and Community Engagement Manager at Canadian Stage, and we have with us the show creator Charles S. Smith. So I'm gonna sit first, right? And I'm gonna start by reading his bio, just a minute reading. Yes. Okay. So, guys, if you wanna know more about his bio, please refer to your program. And in that case, my first question is, Charles, how are you feeling right now?
Right now, I'm really excited. I mean, I don't see much of the work because obviously I'm not a dancer. But I'm just so excited by the way it has come together. It's been quite some time to create, and so it feels wonderful.
So when we read the program, we see that there is the reference to the griot African tradition. So what can you tell us about that?
So the griot, West Africa, is a storyteller. It's the keeper of the history. It's the memory. And griots often perform with dancers and drummers. And that has been brought back to life through the Harlem Renaissance in the United States, where I'm from, as well as through the Black Arts movement. And it's also alive in other areas. As you know, we've got people who coming from Trinidad and from Jamaica, and also from Canada, who are very familiar with that tradition. So it's something that our blood memory has kept alive, and our ancestors have kept alive in their own ways, largely in secret in the age of slavery, but obviously in the Harlem Renaissance, where I get my leanings from, was quite out there. And certainly in the Black Arts movement, it was very radical. When I think of Ntozake Shanga's work for color girls who considered suicide, I mean, that really brought it to a forefront. But it was people like Amiri Baraka working with Sun Ra, Larry Neal, etc. Some of the work that June Jordan had done, and so on. Even Toni Morrison at one point had been reading poetry or some of her fiction to Bill T. Jones dancing and Max Roach playing drums. So it's something we know. It's in our body, and it comes through our time as being persons of African descent.
So, what was your first encounter with Eastman music, and what made you think he would be a good subject for a live performance that wasn't solely music-based?
My first encounter with Eastman was really on Facebook. He was a local musician who had put on, circulating Evil Nigger, about 5 minutes of it. And when I heard it, it's like, can I say this? Wow, shit. I thought I knew most really, avant-garde, contemporary black artists. I am very involved in listening to avant-garde jazz, and I didn't know who this person was. And so the music just brought me more and more into him. I then got the CD called Unjust Malaise, which you can get on, you can Google it and listen to his music, or you can buy it. And that got me into reading a bit about who he was and the time he lived. And he's about 15 years older than I am. And his story resonated because when I grew up, I went to a private high school. I was the only black kid in my class. It was painful. And I could resonate with what he must have been feeling, being the only black person in circumstances that he was in, whether in Ithaca, New York, whether in the Curtis School of Music, and then in the minimalist camp, the University of Buffalo, and then in Manhattan in particular. If you Google, you can find a lot of images of him, and you'll see he's alone. He's alone. He's the only black person there. And so that strongly resonated with me because at the same time, he was around and being active in the Black Power movement and also in the beginning of the gay rights movement. And he brought both of those identities together. For me, it was moving into the Black Power movement after my high school experience because, I basically wanted to tell those students that I knew and whom I don't know anymore, fuck off. Because, they didn't understand. They thought it was fun to beat up 22 kids, beat up one black kid. And the teachers thought it was funny too. So I just said after that, hey, and I understood the pain he must have felt. I understood his desire to reject everything and to go a different way. And my older brother is a novelist, and he also was a Black Panther captain. And so I began to learn from him, and began to go to theater school in Harlem, the Frank Silvera's workshop. Well, I was also going to theater in NYU and in the Village. But that Harlem experience was really critical because I was around other Black playwrights. And the forms that they use, or that we use, were not necessarily Western-based forms. So that's what kind of catapults some of my work, is I do a lot of my work, my poetry, I find music and then ask dancers to come and interpret it. And this one was a significant departure because one, I found these 4 pieces that I just fell in love with: Evil Nigger, Prelude to St. John's, Stay on It, and Gay Gorilla. And for the first time, I had to write to the music, not find the music after I wrote something. So Eastman was speaking to me. He was saying, you've got 20 minutes here. What are you gonna do with it? With Evil Nigger. You've got 11 minutes here with Prelude to St. John. What are you gonna do with it? You have 25 minutes with Stay on It. What are you gonna do with it? And you have these. And so for me, I also have a theater background. I wanted to write the poetry as a theatrical form. And have various characters to be able to show the tensions that he was experiencing in his life, which come really to the fore in Stay on It. That is the area where there's most conflict between the non-Blacks, as we call them, and the Eastmans, the Black dancers, where they began to shun him, particularly the episode with John Cage, where it seemed that there's no causal link, but however, it's rather interesting in terms of circumstances that his career went downhill after he outed Cage.
Any questions? Yes.
So with Stay On It, you had a lot of images from what looked like the disco.
Yep.
Now, was that the time of disco? Is that how he composed that piece?
Eastman was one of the first of the minimalists to use pop music in his work. And yes, I would assume it would have been influenced by gay bars. It is a love song, Stay On It. And he did frequent the Toilet, as it was called, in the Lower East Side, which was, just a little bit south of 8th Street. So that stuff came into his work. Eastman was also very influenced by jazz. His brother Jerry was a jazz musician, or is a jazz musician, he's still alive. He was very influenced by Thelonious Monk and John Coltrane. So the introduction to the book, Gay Gorilla, is written by George Lewis, who is we would call him a jazz musician. He'd probably reject that title. But he's someone who teaches at Columbia University, had come out of the Chicago School, the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians. And in the introduction to the book, Gay Gorilla, he talks about the various musical influences that Eastman went through, everything from pop to jazz, and how that shaped his music different from other minimalists like the ones Feldman, Sem, Meredith Monk, Paul, Philip Glass, and so on and so forth. Their music is nothing like his.
So the work is radical, you said it yourself. So my question is, what is the status quo for you?
Well, the status quo, the institutions that surround us every day. I used to teach at university, and haven't done that for a while. But one of the interesting things I would ask the students every year, we usually get the same answers. Name me the 2 most important influences in your life. And they would say their parents, and usually education. Okay, and the parents, what is their focus? On your education so you can get a good job and live a good life, etc. I said, okay, good, you got that. And then I would say, okay, if school has been the most important institution in your life, how many years have you been in it? And count early childhood education. So, let's say we've got students who are 23, 24. They would say about 20 odd years they've been in this institution. And then I would say, okay, how many in your formal education Black authors have you read? Hardly any hands go up. Indigenous authors, hardly any hands go up. Known to be queer, writing about queer subjects, hardly any hands go up. White women, some hands go up. White men, all hands go up. And so that, to me, is a status quo. We are being surrounded with this story that comes from one part of the world to neglect and ignore the riches that come from elsewhere, to suppress the riches that come from elsewhere. So that's the status quo. And we see it now in the ugliness of war. What's going on in Palestine, for example, where, I mean, the incredible atrocities there, and what does it take the President of the United States to come out and say something? Because the World Kitchen, whatever it is, Center Kitchen, a friend of his, these three things get attacked. And suddenly he says to Netanyahu, that's it. Like 33,000 people killed, the place destroyed, that's the status quo. And that's what Eastman was against. He made it really clear that he was against racism, he was against sexism, he was against capitalism. Thus, when he talks about the term of field nigger, he's saying that's what built the United States of America. That's what built it. Exactly. Exactly.
So my next question would be, what does the word guerrilla mean for you?
The word, sorry?
Guerrilla.
Gay guerrilla. Yeah, well, he says it pretty clearly. I mean, he's struggling. He's a fighter. And, you know, guerrilla warriors, whether in Vietnam or, you know, Che Guevara and Fidel Castro, their journey to take over Cuba, you know, the African National Congress in South Africa, you know, so on. These were guerrilla struggles in many cases. And, you know, being a guerrilla struggler is you know, you have to really be clever about how you make your attacks against the status quo, because otherwise, as Che Guevara finds out, you can get killed rather easily. So it's that question of strategy, it's that question of finding comrades whom you can trust, whom you can work with, who are there up to, as he would say, the death. So it's that sense of the ongoing struggle that he felt was important, particularly when he talked about, because he calls it gay guerrilla, and at that time, you have to remember, this is in the 1970s, when he wrote that piece, he's saying the gay community just did not have that. And he wanted to see more of it, and was hoping that he would be one as well.
Any questions from the audience?
There's somebody over there.
Yes, yes. Do you need a microphone?
No, I don't need a microphone, thank you.
Marvelous, thank you.
Clearly a lot of thought has gone into the development and creation of this piece, and this talkback is really quite enlightening. My question specifically is, do you have a specific intention or response that you would hope to elicit from an audience seeing this piece, and then just by itself, devoid of this talk, just by itself?
Yeah, I would hope that you would be inspired by what he has done. That's why I did this. I felt he should have been known during his time. I listened to minimalism. I know the work of Philip Glass, Meredith Monk, Lucas Foss, we can go on, Steve Glass, Steve Wright, etc. How come they are so well known and he's not? That's shameful. I love the Kronos Quartet. They don't play his music. They'll go around the world and play all this music from China, from Africa, etc. They've worked with Tanya Tagaq here, but they don't play Eastman. Why? So I would hope people would be inspired to find out more about him. More of his work is coming out now. You know, his piano solo in Vienna, for example. More people are beginning to take his work and play it in Germany, in England, and in the United States. But you know, this is like how many years after his death? So you have to remember, he died in 1990. It was 8 months after, before the Village Voice even recognized it. It was 15 months after that when Unjust Malaise came out, the triple CD that captured some of his work. It was 20 some odd years before the book Gay Guerrilla came out. So what I would hope you would do is really find out more about him, explore him on your own, see what can, that you leave inspired to say, hey, how come it is we do not recognize great black art when we see it? There's a Lester Bowie, musician with the Art Ensemble of Chicago, would always say, it's great black art, right? And we seem to miss it. And so that for me is important. That's why I wanted to do this work, was to say, you know, here's another great black artist. I'll add one thing to it. When we get into rehearsal, oftentimes we get together, and as artists are warming up, I will put on Cecil Taylor, I will put on Charlie Mingus, I will put on Duke Ellington, I will put on Sarah Vaughan, I will put on Betty Carter. So we get the sense, man, this is some great stuff here. Great stuff here. And it's not just new. This music has been coming out since the times pre-slavery up to now. Because you notice in some of the references, we talk about various ways of sexual orientation pre-colonial contact. It's just restoring the history.
Yes.
Right? Not to say that being queer is the white man's illness foisted upon black bodies, but these were highly recognized individuals in their bodies pre-colonial contact. Right? So all that stuff that we have pushed aside of bringing back, that's my goal. Is dig into his work, see what he was talking about, listen to his work, and then find others.
My next question would, oh yes, ma'am, please.
Never mind.
Charmaine.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate your intent or intention or goal, but for me, to be able to go to explore more of Eastman, I first have to shelve and navigate what I saw. Right? So it landed differently. It landed, yeah.
Yeah, it's you know, even this is the first time we're doing all 4 pieces together.
Mm-hmm.
We've workshopped since 2017.
Okay.
It does take time, let me tell you, even for me. Still, I discovered him in 2014. This is 10 years after. After an evening like this, and yesterday, and probably tomorrow and Sunday, I'm going to leave a little bit shaken.
Yeah, it's so we had conversations during the intermission, and I described it as raw footage, and part of the conversation was, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
you know, the idea of embodiment of vocabulary and how that would differ from what I describe as raw footage. But for me, I guess emotionally, spiritually, I can take the raw footage because otherwise it would be rare. So, yeah. Mhm.
Sounds like you're going to have some deep thinking.
You know me, Charles.
Yep. Well, that's the purpose of doing this work. That's the purpose of my work, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Have you got another hand right next?
Yeah. You made, just to kind of, you made a comment with respect to when you're finished with all this, you have to. I can't-
Sorry, ma'am, please speak up.
Use my voice.
Would you like me to go with the microphone?
It's okay. It's okay. I was just in my thoughts. Sorry. You made reference to the fact that, and help me out, that after all this is done, that you have to absorb or process. I can't remember the term that you used, because it's a lot, right? Is what you said. My question is, and I know I had spoke about it in the intermission. My question is, with respect to this process and dealing with a lot, is there any healing work that happens with the artists? I find often, especially if we're talking about approaching art in a non-colonial way, if it's more integrative, in my eye, artistic expression is a healing modality. So, what if, in fact, is the process when we're dealing with a lot of these triggers and traumas? Like, what is the process for yourself, the dancers, the vocalists and everybody, to just kind of, the audience, just to, well, yeah, right, to kind of purge, release, so that, we take off some layers and not walking around, because it is a lot.
Oh yeah, it is. Our rehearsal process probably differs from most groups. And part of that is that when we walk into a room, we do what we call a check-in, which many people do. But part of our check-in oftentimes will be breathing together, standing in a circle and breathing together, looking at each other as we're in that circle, breathing together, and opening up to conversation about what this story is about. I mean, as you saw, we have a mixed race group. We also have, there are folks who are openly queer, others who are heteronormative. And so all of these things become subject of conversation that we have. And, from Kevin, sitting up there, we've learned to use the critical response process, both in terms of when we have to do it formally, but also the spirit of the CRP, as it's called, where we inquire, we ask, we develop comradeship with each other, so we can ask and we can say what needs to be said. And so with, let's say, any of the artists, I'm rather open about the process, about the pain, about expunging the pain. I admire, am a strong advocate of Frantz Fanon's work, particularly his book, The Wretched of the Earth. And as you know, in The Wretched of the Earth, he says the only way to exercise colonialism is through violence, right? So there has to be that that comes out, and that's what we do in this work. That's what we do, and we talk about it. We don't, so I've taken books into it. There's a new one out about Fanon called The Rebels Clinic. Put it in. Who wants to borrow it? Who wants to read it? Black Skins, White Mask. Who wants to read it? Suggest to people, here are things you might want to explore. We collect articles about Eastman, we collect articles about Black artists, and we send them out. The images that you see, the artists found those. Right? In some of our early rehearsals, Kevin, Rodney DeVerlis, Bakari went hunting for images of Eastman, found them and brought them into rehearsal. Say, hey, let's understand this better. Right? And we do that as a community, because that's where the healing comes in. That it's not imposed, there's no director. There are various ways that we integrate our skills into the space and recognizing we're dealing with very difficult subject matter.
Thank you.
Quite welcome.
Yes, sorry, yes. I'll get back to you.
Thank you for sharing. That's really appreciated.
Please speak up.
I said thank you for sharing, and it's been really generative to hear a lot of other insights from the group to feel like we're really thinking together. I'm glad that you brought up the knowledge, because I think that connected to some of this, we think about some of his notes about acts of auto-destruction when you are in contact with oppressive, violent, damaging systems, and thinking through the way that he lived, the way that he approached his work. Sometimes I really try to reconcile this relationship to visibility and how much of his life was meant to feel public, feel available, and how much of it was made for the purpose of him to express something that had a really intimate and personal role. So I'm curious, as a creator, how you navigate that tension between making and contributing to a visibility project in the face of somebody who actually has a lot of documented and purposefully undocumented examples of wanting to render himself visible.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, that's why I call it Searching for Eastman, because we're searching. We don't know everything about it. We don't know what happened in those years that he was living on the streets, like between 1982 and 1990 before he died. We don't know. We have snippets. And some of the snippets that we get don't come from him. They come from people who he knew, right? So that's a really important aspect to say that, maybe we'll find out more, I don't know. Maybe we won't. But that is, so for me, looking at it is not just about searching for Eastman as in the person, Julius Eastman. It is really searching for why are black arts not recognized? I love that final line that Nikisha reads, never really fully recognized. I can go on with the name. Where's the Duke Ellington movie? Where's the Max Roach movie? Where's the Sarah Vaughan movie? He's a great artist. And that's what we talk about. So searching for Eastman, yes, it opens a door to his life, but the bigger question is, Amiri Baraka says it best. Jazz is America's classical music. How come it's not treated that way? Ornette Coleman, for 7 years, would not play in publicly because he wasn't getting paid the same as classical musicians. Cecil Taylor, the same thing. So they had to make those demands. So that's the sense of of bringing up what we can through what we know, through what's available. And believe me, there are many articles that people have written about Julius Eastman. Yes, they're predominantly white people, right? And when I interviewed a number of them, they got upset with me because I said, you've abandoned him.
We are approaching the end of the talkback, so we're going to have one last question.
Just on the topic of genres, and you brought up like Attica in '71, and then I immediately thought of Scott Aaron, 1970, and then the riots, the ghetto riots in the '60s in the U.S. How do genres affect, or how does he fit into this whole genre? Like Beyonce now, challenging country, and how does genre fit into this one? Can he fit into any of it?
Well, I don't think Eastman was necessarily concerned about fitting in. That would have been really quite opposite of what he was trying to do. He was about exploring what he could be. Like I said, there's one line where he could boldly, blindly be. And it was a question of, yes, he was influenced by Western classical music, no doubt about it, but he took his detours because of the areas that he was concerned with. And yes, he was very concerned with the politics of the day, not just with Attica, but also Stonewall, and also the rise, the beginning of the gay rights movement. And he was quite open about bringing those challenges. So there's a line in the piece that talks about playing in Buffalo Pride in 1973. Right? That's the time when Bella Abzug and another, I can't remember the other congresswoman, I think it was Gloria Steinem, was working with her to get equality rights enshrined in the American Constitution for the gay community, the queer community. It didn't succeed, but that wasn't going to stop him. So it wasn't just his nigger series, it was also part, like things like Gay Gorilla or Feminine and other ways, and Stay On It, where he was really quite open about his sexuality. And as he made it really clear that he wasn't going to bow down for anything around that. Yeah, I hope that helps him. But I would say that he defied genres because he was around all those folks. They knew him. They used him. 8 Songs from Mad King was written by Maxwell Davis. Got him a Grammy. Meredith Monk, he was on Dolman Music. They knew him. And like I say, look up the stuff. It's all available. Google it, and you see all these pictures of these folks in the University of Buffalo, and he's there with them, and they're playing his stuff. And his stuff is very different from all. You listen to Morton Feldman compared to Julius Eastman on piano, and they're two very different worlds. Some people said that Julius was not a minimalist, he was a maximalist. That's his Africanness. we used the line, the fire of Burundi drums.
Charles, would you like to take another question?
Sure, there's one there.
Please, ma'am.
I'm wondering if you could describe the choreography. You haven't talked about the dancers were. There were so many of them on the stage, and how do you do that? It looked like an abstract painting, like how they remember where to move, and I mean it was complex and very layered. And I wondered if you could describe that choreography.
I can't describe it in the way a dancer would, but I can tell you the process. The process is collective creativity. Right? There is no choreographer to Eastman. There are choreographers. I remember the first rehearsal, or one of the first rehearsals, where I think it was Kevin Ormsby, Michael Mortley, and Rodney DeVerlos who just did that evil nigga just like this. And so that's what they began to do. And then they began to call it the atom. Right? And so the circle became very important, both for its power and how it draws in, also for its hypnotic effect. Right? And as others came in, they would add certain things to the choreography. I mean, actually, it's so funny because before Bakari joined us in Stay On, no, not Stay On, it was Prelude to St. Joan, I was doing Bakari's part. I'm not a dancer. But we needed a body to play that part. And then thankfully Bakari came in so I could step out. And he added his elements to it. And there was a real conversation around how to work on this piece. And as others, particularly the non-Eastmans came in, how are they going to interpret their role? So obviously there's some mimicking. Kim is going to answer some questions here, I guess. Yeah, so it really is just a point of, from a collective point of view, how various dancers come into the work and then add elements, discuss them, etc., until we have a collective creation.
Think about it.
So I should apologize. Maybe it's a colonial thing. Charles should be the only person here. There's a whole bunch of people behind it.
Right.
I want to also make note that they're not just dancers, they're artists. And in the African diaspora presentation of arts and performing arts, they're not separate things. So when Charles mentions being a dancer earlier, it's because we were particular that there's poetry movement that is connected in the way he created the work, that is we see as text. As the rehearsal director and dramaturg, and previous to this, in all the work, I think it's important that I begin to talk about these particular pieces in a language that Charles may not be able to. What you see is the development of a phrase structure that was built once, and then as each of the collective artists came in, they were invited to add to it. And that is both all the generation of artists. Note, it's an intergenerational artists, nationally awarded, companies over generations, channeling Bakar into the room. And so when we built the structure that you see as a choreography was built primarily from the text that Charles had written, and then through creative structures like the critical response process, actions, what do you see, what is the imagery within it, what is the context of what you see in it that you then respond to. And so the choreography through phrase work, through gestures, like searching for Eastman, there are 5 Eastman gestures that are based on images that came from what we saw online, because we had no idea about who this person was. That became really, really important parts that you see visually there, right? So this one that you see, we abstract into different spaces. This one, the laugh is not just because we actually saw a picture of him laughing and went, how exactly would he have laughed? It wasn't ha 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 ha. It's open, ha ha ha. So that became some of the actions and gestures that we also used to shape the choreography and to build the work. So from the initial phrase work that you see in the beginning, we began to build out the structure of how it came into space. We need to put this out there now. During the pandemic, or coming out of the pandemic, we worked also with Atlantic Ballet of Canada, for which Charles and I have a beautiful relationship. And so some of the movement vocabulary was, what do you see in this? How do you respond to this work? in development through movement, and we honored that. And that's part of the collective experience. So we honored that into the collective as well, and into what you saw as the performance. I won't take up any more time.
I want to add up one more thing to that. Is Eastman talks about, and you heard it when he spoke, and we used his words, about music being organic. And that was very important in the choreography, to be able to take what we did in the first piece and have it in the last. So it wasn't just 3 different pieces. There was a through line to each up to the end, from the beginning, from the beginning. And again, it was honoring his work. This is what he said about his work, and how can we best honor it? There's one thing I just want to say before, unless there's another question. One of the things that I find challenging, and I know this may have an impact more on black bodies than on white bodies, is sometimes the harshness of the experience and the music that expresses it. I got introduced to avant-garde jazz quite young. And I remember hanging out at Columbia University for hours, listening to Amina Claudine Myers and the Art Ensemble and you name it. Right? And I had opportunities to, when they had their breaks, to sit around as the young blood and listen to them talk to each other. But more importantly, I was able to watch how they exercise, and I use that term deliberately, spirit, in ways that you would say look violent. Because the American experience, Rodney said this once in rehearsal, the United States, our bodies, our black bodies, were still in the house of the master and still being oppressed some 500 years later. As Amiri Baraka says in his poem, "An agony is now, I am inside someone who hates me." And he ends it with, it's a thing that burns inside, and that thing screams. Right? That was the radicalness of the black arts movement. Say, we're not going to take this anymore. We are in pain. And we're going to tell you about it through our art. So it's difficult. It's difficult because it means we have to come to terms with what is that pain inside and how do we get it out? How do we get it out?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for your contribution. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, all of you. And please follow the Festival of New Theatre that we are presenting. The Festival of New Theatre is the cornerstone of Canadian Stage mission to develop new work and contribute to Toronto's unique cultural landscape. Please find more information in canadianstage.com. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Do you want to say anything about healing on my camera? Whatever you want to say. Because what he said at the end there about the pain, right, that we carry that we want to talk about, but then we have to go somewhere with that pain, right? And you asked that great question about healing. So what are your thoughts on that?
You know, it's interesting because this is something that I've been pondering a lot in the last few days, specifically, and I think it's really important for us as a people to always go deep in acknowledging the healing, but it's equally as important to create a new narrative to move through. And I think what we've done very well is acknowledge and unearth and almost villainize folks in our community that want to have a new narrative. And I think I'm starting to realize a revelation that's come to me is that the powers that be, not that we're trying to aspire to be like them or create their acceptance, but one thing that they do very well is the fact that they know how to move forward and move on. Obviously, they don't have the same kind of experience that we do, but it's almost like we have to try not to be hypnotized in navel gazing. And it's like, if we're going to unearth pain, we're going to unearth it, feel it, connect to it, speak truth to power, but also create a new narrative to move forward. Because then 100 years, 200 years, we're in the same place. And that's what they want us to do.
Distractions too, right? It
That's what they
keeps
want
us
us-
distracted
keeps us
from
distracted.
all the other work that we
Right.
keep doing too. Because it's
Right.
not like we stop doing the other work. We're doing
Right,
it.
right.
But it's a weight. It's such a weight.
It's heavy.
Such a weight.
And so I realized too, and this is one of the, like, I've been cocooning for a while, so all these revelations are coming to me. I'm like, oh. So it's beautiful. It's an important, for example, like even the transatlantic slave trade experience.
Right.
It's important that we are educated about it. We know, we tell the younger generation about it. But when we think about mindset, we have to be very mindful on how that's delivered. And when it is delivered, it's now I realize it's irresponsible for us not to go through a healing process after it's been delivered. Because then, in our younger generation, I'm even thinking about what I've done to my son. And it's just like, but I was like, no, we need, especially as artists, we need to be more responsible to bring the knowledge, bring the acknowledgement, awareness, so the history does not happen again, and make sure they know the history and that sort of thing. But then we have to extract that part of us that are artists or academics and everything, and pour like healing bombs and make sure that they're moving through this with like a armor of healing. Because otherwise, like, a lot of us just hold on to this identity, and it's strong and powerful, but isn't
But not empowering.
and it's not empowering. It
But
doesn't
not
serve us.
empowering.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So I was like, it is highly irresponsible for us now. That's the thing that's been screaming in my spirit. It's highly irresponsible for us to, or it doesn't even have to be the transatlantic slave trade or even the post-slavery era to talk about the atrocities and what's happening. But what happens, because we've got a new generation that the playing field could be equal if in fact their mindset is just reconditioned.
Right.
That's our job, to recondition it, heal, and empower them,
We
right?
first have to recondition our.
Well, this is it.
Right. We first have to be reconditioned.
That's that part.
Peel away.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky art because we need to know our history. We need to acknowledge the systems that have created $1 trillion industries for other empires and whatever, right? But in saying that, what do we do to move through?
Yeah, and I think I'm hearing also really importantly that even as we're working through that pain and that trauma, that is the history that we carry, right? Because it's also cellular. It's not even just like what we know over here.
Very
It's there in our
cellular.
bodies, right?
Very.
It's about how, I think I'm hearing from you also, how we are conscious about the re-traumatizing and
Well, this
the
is it.
continuing, right? And it's particularly when you've also got people coming into the world like your sons and next generations to
This
come
is
who are coming
it.
kind of going, oh, what's all this stuff? But then they're like confronted by all this stuff. And we have context too as we navigated it, closer to those spaces,
Yes.
and even what it looks like as we're working through it. Many of the young people coming don't necessarily always have that. So then they're
Right.
like, so it hits them in a way.
Yeah.
And sometimes what they do is they run.
Yeah.
Or and then we get into, well, why can't you? And it's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
because it's such a thing.
Right.
And so you're
Right.
saying we have to be thoughtful about
do.
how do we put care
We do.
and love and you know.
And I
all
know
of
that won't be digested very well
Anything
for
you want to say, my
others,
sister?
but
I think I said a lot. I did.
Thank you. It was beautiful.
thank you.
Thank you. What's your name? Sorry.
Debbie.
Debbie.
Yes.
Debbie what?
Debbie Weinickle-Scarrett.
Great. And
Yeah.
your name here?
Charmaine Headley.
Charmaine Headley. Great. And there's Kevin. Thank you, my brother. That was beautiful. You're stepping in and jumping in. Thank you. That was beautiful.
For all these years, you know me well.
Yeah, man. You came. No, because you came and you supported your brother because you were clear. That isn't his. That is you, and you answered it
Why?
beautifully.
I mean, for those persons who also here before, I'm like, he's not the creator of the show. The creator
Right.
is the collective.
Ah,
and so why do you not
nice.
think about more persons being there?
Nice.
He's the poet. He has written the poems.
Right.
He's the main artistic director and instigator. But then say that he's not the creator of the show, because there is a whole set of cast over 7 years that actually is.
A little decolonizing moment. Lovely.
Talk to you.
All right.
Good to see you.
You too.
Have a good evening, everybody.
All right. I think I need to. How brilliant was that? Wasn't that great? All right. So I'll post this and y'all see. Little night at the theater. Actually, I'm going to try and get Charles to make a little comment of some kind. Hold on. I don't want to stop this yet because I want Charles on camera saying something. Thank you.
Thank you.
And she brought back. So she's a flower.
Thank you.
Charles.
Hey, how are you?
Thank you. I too probably saw the same thing on Facebook about him. I'm Douglas.
Yes, we met a long time ago.
Yeah, I saw it, and I also remember I found everything. So then I saw this. I said, "Oh my God, Eastman! I want to come and see this." And then, so the piece that I wanted to ask you just to see on camera, because I was thinking about there. So even as you're looking at the intersection of him as a black queer man, right? Because you made very strong points about the sort of way the silencing and the invisibility of black folks' creativity, right, and contribution to the American canon, particularly, right, and cultural canon. Is there another piece, though, that other layer of? Because I was wanting to hear about if you found anything, because I was curious about how he was taken up by black folks generally as a queer artist, because he's a queer black man. Was there any, Rustin went through his thing, Baldwin went some of his thing, Lord, various people went through that even while they were contributing to the black canon, as it's so to speak, right?
Yeah.
So was there anything like that came up for you that you came across?
I can only infer. So the Brooklyn Philharmonia was one of these affirmative action programs that really brought together black and Latino artists.
Great.
And he was there for a period of time, and one might have thought he might have felt at home there.
Right.
Now, was it because he was out? The Black Power movement was not exactly a very inclusive organization at the time, right? And but then it was always surprising to me in a way. This is what I mean, questions that he never kind of went over to jazz,
Right?
Because
right.
Cecil Taylor, everyone knew Cecil was queer, and played with pretty much everyone. People wanted to play with Cecil,
Right.
And yet, he didn't go there. So it may have just been he didn't feel his music was going to fit that way, or
The next year or two.
whatever. That's why I call it searching for Eastman, because there is still a lot we
So
don't
still
know.
more to say, right? And so it's really about opening up a conversation
That's right.
and getting people not just to come and do you're not doing all the work for us, you're saying.
No, I'm like,
So it's-
find some
So now provoke us to kind of go and the talkback was beautiful, because I have to say the talkback really, even the way you navigate the talkback, the things you said was powerfully added to the experience. So I'm glad I came tonight to see the talkback, right? Are you gonna do more any talkbacks again?
I think that's it for now.
Yeah.
But I can tell you though, I can send you a lot of the articles we have.
Great.
Bakari, can I borrow your pen once more? Let me get your email address. Write it down somewhere. Do I have anything I can
Paper?
there's a piece of paper.
Yeah, you can get this. Yeah.
Just put down your,
Oh yeah, but you can write, yeah.
Go ahead.
So it's D-S-T-E-W-A-R-T. So D Stewart. And it's at rogers.com.
Okay, I'll send you. There's a lot of material we were able to find, and there's still more coming out. So a podcast recently came out. I'm trying to remember where it was. There was one in the UK, and then there was one in Germany, where there's more and more discovering his work, playing his work, etc. So it's really, And that's why I encourage people to find more.
Right,
right. Get it out.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's great. Thank you.
Yep,
Thank
okay,
you. Oh, and
great.
how many more performances are there?
We have two more. Tomorrow and Sunday. So Sunday's a matinee. Tomorrow is evening time.
Okay,
Tomorrow is Saturday.
I'll post
right?
something on my IG. Yeah, and I have a YouTube page I put this stuff on, because
wonderful.
particularly when I come to something like this where you are exploring a multi-layered character, I'm like, oh, black folks, and I have family members who are also shut-ins. They don't get to go to things, so I do this stuff and I post it and they get to engage a little bit. And then it seems like more people enjoy it as well. So, but it was a beautiful talk back. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks.
All right.
Okay, we'll talk to you. I'll send you that stuff.
Thanks.
All right. There you go.
This is at Canadian Stage. All right, and the play is.
I remember
I'm searching for Eastman. How brilliant is that? And then what you just saw is the conversation. But look at this stuff. Eastman. Again, isolated, as he said, the only black person. All right, enough, eh? Beautiful. I'll do a little bit more.
Tomorrow. You're gonna be tomorrow. Okay. Tomorrow. Ready?
Oh, that's great. Look at that.
Look.